I find it quite funny when you go into the elevator, if you're the closest to the button that closes the door, you have to hit that button to close the door. If you can't just wait like 3 more seconds for the elevator door to close itself. The Singaporeans will like, you know, they don't like to wait.
Meet Benji. He's from Sydney, but he's been living in Singapore for 8 years. During our amazing conversation, he told me what's wrong with coffee in Singapore, what it's like for an Aussie to live in a high-rise building instead of a house, and common misconceptions Australians have about Singapore. I'm Max, entrepreneur and YouTuber. Let's go. What's the most striking differences for you between Singapore and Australia?
It's a bit hard to understand how things are priced. So if you want to buy freshly imported broccoli from Australia, it's cheaper in Singapore than what it is in the Australian supermarket. So it kind of blows my mind how that can happen. But on the same note, like products that are very similar, like milk and yogurt, 1 litre of yogurt and 1 litre of milk, yogurt will be 5 times more expensive than Australia, but milk will only be double the price. So I don't understand how, like I would have thought they would both be 5 times more or both be 2 times more, but to have like almost the same thing because they're both got to be refrigerated. I don't understand the price difference, but it's like $20 for a litre of milk, of yogurt. On the coffee culture, so in Australia, we love our coffee. I think up here, Starbucks is pretty popular and there are some good espresso coffee places, but the milk is different. Up here, when you buy a litre of milk, it lasts about 3 or 4 weeks, whereas in Australia, our milk lasts about 7 days. So they put other things in the milk. It says Australian milk on it, but we don't sell that milk in Australia. So it's sort of, maybe it's a bit of a trick for people here to think, oh, I'm buying Australian milk.
Organic.
You can buy Australian milk, but it's very hard to find the same ones that are in Australia. But yeah, the coffee culture is a bit different. So here, when you order a coffee, weigh how much coffee goes into the ground coffee goes into the container, and weigh maybe how much milk is going in, and then it takes so long. So there'll be 5 people ordering a coffee, and you'll spend 10 minutes waiting for them to make 5 coffees. Whereas in Australia, everything's freestyle, bang, 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 straight out the door. Like if it takes longer than a minute between when you order and when you leave, you probably never come back. I think also here, people don't tend to learn people's names. So if I come to get a coffee, it'll be, hi, what would you like? And it's not like, hey, g'day Ben, welcome back, or hi, you come here all the time, what's your name? It doesn't seem to be that same connection there, but I kind of, I do miss that a little bit, where like your barista almost becomes like your mate in Australia, whereas here it's like they're just serving you. So maybe that little bit of difference.
I think the big difference, like as far as I know, like in Sydney and Australia in general, people tend to live in the houses, not like in a condo. So.
Yeah, definitely.
And here's a different story.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you happy like living in a condo?
Yeah, I don't mind. I've sort of, in Australia, I mean, I grew up in a house. I was quite lucky. I grew up on the beach in a big house. And I didn't realize how lucky I was until later on in life, I guess. That was just the norm for me. But yeah, I think definitely here, the things that are kind of different is like here, if you want something, like if you run out of gas for the barbecue, it'll get delivered here in 20 minutes. Whereas in Australia, you got to get the tank, get in the car, go for a drive for 15 minutes. So there's a lot more efficiencies here on how quickly you get something. Everything gets delivered like that. Singaporeans don't like to wait for anything, which is awesome.
Do you think it's more fast-paced here, probably?
Yeah, I think so. I think Singaporeans is very, very efficient. Everything happens really quickly. Go to a train station and count 100 seconds. The train's already there. The airport's a perfect example because everyone talks about how good Singapore airport is. It's so good that you get so used to it. When you go to another airport and you wait 40 minutes in the queue for immigration, you just think, why don't they have more people here, you know? Exactly, if you go to Malaysia, you know, you see 20 immigration lines, but only 2 are open, right? In Singapore, you see 20 immigration lines and all 20 are open, right?
Yeah. So, and you have automated gates as well.
Or now it's all automated, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you think that Australians have some misconception about Singapore?
For sure, yeah. I think the idea that it's a super expensive city, it can be, but it also can be really cheap. Like in Australia, you couldn't rent as cheap as you could here. If you were willing to sort of downgrade your living style, you could get away with paying really cheap rent if you wanted. You can't do that really in Australia. The cheapest rent is it. Same thing with food. Like in Australia, a cheap lunch would be $15 to $20, whereas here it can be $4, $3. I think people have this idea that everything is expensive in Singapore.
If you compare Sydney and Singapore, the cost of living would be similar?
I think it depends how you want to live. If you want to live in a house like you do in Australia, then it's going to be super expensive here. You know, the longer you're here, the more you learn how you want to live. I think in general, if you're earning money in Singapore, you're also paying low tax. And this provides like a bit of a different type of cash flow. I think the other thing in Australia is we pay tax before we get paid. In Singapore, you get paid everything at the end of the year. You get a bill that's about half a month's salary or something like that. And then you just pay it all at once. So your cash flow is different. So I think if you're a foreigner coming here, initially you think, oh, it's super expensive. But once you're not paying a whole lot of tax, it becomes much more easier to spend a bit more and enjoy life.
You also own or used to own a motorbike. If you specify for people like for bikers who come in Singapore, how it works?
Oh man, like strap in. So first of all, before you buy a motorbike, the motorbike comes with a 10-year COE, which is like 10-year registration. This costs at the moment about $12 12K. So before you buy the motorbike, the certificate of entitlement to buy a motorbike costs you 12K. Then you buy the motorbike. So the motorbike will cost you about double what it would cost in any other country. And then you add the COE on. Roughly a bike that would cost 20K in Australia will cost you 40K in Singapore, roughly, once you add up all of the extras. They've got a law here with the motorbike helmets where it has to have batch import testing sticker on the back of it. I've got quite a big head. I'm a big-headed boy, and I can't buy a helmet in my size. But if I'm caught with the helmet that I'm wearing, it's up to 6 months in prison. I've asked the police, I've got email communication, I want to buy a helmet. I've emailed the Transport Minister. I've tried to help me buy a helmet, but it just doesn't exist. So yeah, it's not that I'm trying to break the law, but somewhat a little bit of a criminal, not intentionally. So hopefully they can create a law that allows the companies that import helmets to stock all sizes and not just sizes for local people.
Yeah. The way of driving here in Singapore, is it much different compared to Australia?
I think there's a lot of similarities. I think there's a few differences. People travel a lot closer to each other. One of the reasons I believe the speed limit's so low is because everyone travels so close to the car in front. If you go to Europe, people are on autobahns, they leave a huge gap because of the speed, but here everyone travels close together. So if you're on an expressway, you're not uncommon to see a big pile up of 4 cars that hit each other because they're all so close. And also if you're indicating to change lanes, instead of letting you in, people will speed up to block you to make you go behind. So some people just don't indicate, they just sort of duck into the lane. So you've really got to be aware of everyone around you. I think in Malaysia, traffic seems to flow a bit better. I think you can kind of get an idea with what people are doing. In Singapore, a little bit less predictable.
Yeah.
Also, the taxis here, way of driving that's very on and off the throttle. So you'll be on a straight road with no one in front and the car will be like accelerating and accelerating and pumping the accelerator and then pumping.
Yeah.
I don't know why, it's just a thing here. But it's definitely more among the older taxi drivers.
It's a famous thing for Singapore.
Yeah.
You can find articles about it, like explaining. People actually ask, like, on Quora, this website, what's wrong with the taxi drivers who like on and off, do it on and off with the gas. And it's actually the people believe that because the taxi uncles, they think they can save fuel if they do like off, let go the throttle.
Exactly right. My old man was a mechanic, he's retired now, but I think the way engines are designed now with the different fuels, it's worse for the car. So because the fuel doesn't have the same octane, it's not good. You want to drive as smoothly as you can on the accelerator, not pumping it. So on an older car maybe, but on the new model ones, definitely not a good idea.
Yeah, that's true. Is there anything you're still not used to after like 7 years in Singapore? Not used to?
I find it quite funny, when you go into the elevator, if you're the closest to the button that closes the door, you have to hit that button to close the door. You can't just wait like 3 more seconds for the elevator door to close itself. The Singaporeans will like, they don't like to wait. So I do it, but it's still like, I sometimes, I think, in Australia, it's like, maybe I also get used to it. When I go back, maybe I'm also like, close the door. So maybe it's growing on me a little bit, yeah. And the escalator thing. So, you queue up to go up an escalator to get off the train, but if someone's in a rush, they'll just walk in front of you. Yeah. This is still something that's like, we're in a queue, but people will still cut you off. So, in Australia, you definitely cannot do that. Don't do it. Right? No, unless you want to get grabbed and pulled back.
What's the 3 best things for you about Singapore?
Oh, this is really easy. Formula One. So I used to race go-karts when I was a kid, and I love car racing. Huge Daniel Ricciardo fan, even though he's not in racing this year, but I love Formula One here for so many reasons. It's a street circuit, which makes it so much more fun. There's really good vantage points, so you can see a lot of the track, but the city comes alive. It's just electric. And even if you don't like Formula One, it's a really good event. So if you're thinking of when to come to Singapore, come for Formula One, book your tickets early and book a hotel early because it sells out. But really amazing event. I think that's my favorite thing about Singapore. I missed when it hasn't been on because of COVID and other things, but now it's back. A lot of my family come up to visit each time Formula One's on. I host a bit of an event and rent a hotel with a view. Yeah, it's really good fun. Second thing I like about Singapore, I think Singapore reminds me of a game I used to play when I was a kid called Sim City. I don't know if you've played this game, but you basically get like a map, a bit of land, and you've got to try and like build out a city to be efficient. It's like someone designed everything to work perfectly. You got your dock over here and your airport over here and houses and a CBD and train lines and buses. It's like someone built the perfect Sim City. So that I think just the way it's designed, it's just really done with efficiency, as opposed to maybe Sydney, where it's sort of developed over 200 years and everything's a mess. And if you want to go from one place to the other, even if it's 10 kilometers away, it might take you an hour to drive there.
And number 3?
I think the mix of all the cultures and the food and the religions and the people. I think, Singapore has people from from all around the region, but all around the world. So, you know, here you'll meet people from Canada or the US, but you also meet people from Indonesia and Philippines and Malaysia. It's a real great mix. It really is an international city. Every time you go into a workplace, it feels like you're at the United Nations, right? It's amazing. Yeah.
How about Singlish? What do you
Singlish.
think about Singlish?
I love it. Actually, Singlish is weird because it kind of like combines multiple languages that are here in Singapore into the one, right? With a little bit more Chinese influence, but there's definitely, you know, some Malay and some Indian, you know, some Tamil, and it's sort of all blended in, but it's quite nice actually. You learn it along the way, right? Everyone learns Kanla straight away, but there's all of the other words in Singlish as well.
Do you use it like you picked up any words?
Can,
Yeah?
yes.
That's my favorite.
It's funny because on Slack, my companies talk to people all around the world. Someone
Yeah.
will ask me something and I'll write can, and they're like, what? I'm like, I mean, yes, I can. Yeah. I don't tell them, oh, sorry, it's Singlish for yes or okay, right?
Yeah. What advice would you give to the Aussie coming, like thinking to moving to Singapore?
Okay, if you're coming to Singapore, there's a few things I wish I knew before I
Yeah.
came. Here there's a government body called the Urban Redevelopment Board, is it? URA. And there's a website here called ura.gov.sg or something like that. And it shows you what Singapore is doing over the next 15 years. All the projects, all the new trains coming in, all the new land reclamation. But on there it has this part of it on property where you can go in and see the house price of what every single property, apartment or landed property sold for or rented for up to about a month ago. So if you're going to look at an apartment, as a foreigner, they sort of tell you this crazy price. You can actually jump on this site and go, actually, none of the apartments have rented that high. I'm going to make an offer that's relative to that. I wish I knew that because you kind of get a little bit, maybe led down the wrong path on the price, not knowing what your neighbor paid for his place. This is just full transparency on property. So I wish I knew that. You could save quite a few dollars, especially on a 2-year contract for a lease, which they want here. Yeah. You know, you got to work out which part of Singapore you want to live in. So there's so many different areas. I mean, if you like cycling, then in the east. If you like to go out more, then maybe around the city. If you want more of a relaxed lifestyle, don't feel too bad about living far away. Everything's not that far away. So I lived in Upper Changi for a little while, and I used to cycle to work. It took about 50 minutes. Everyone's like, oh, you live near the airport. It's so far away. I mean, in Australia, my commute to work would be an hour and a half, depending on traffic. So there's no one in Singapore that commutes for an hour and a half.
It's impossible.
So don't be afraid to live away from the city a little bit. There's really nice communities. Also, I think don't be fixed on living in a condominium. A lot of the houses here, HDB or government housing, and these properties are amazing. There's a nice mix of culture within the HDBs. The apartments can be really nice inside, that you don't have to have a swimming pool and a tennis court. You can just live in a normal apartment, and the HDBs are really nice, especially with all the things like car shares and these things that you can get easy access to in the car parks downstairs. Can make life really easy, and you can have just as much fun and live in just as nice house.
YouTube thinks this is the best video for you. If it's bad, it's not my fault. Blame YouTube, so go check it out.